In this video, we will show you how to replace your rear caliper on this Honda Accord. This is part of your braking system located behind your rear wheel. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. The first thing you need to do is safely raise and support the rear of the vehicle so the wheel's off the ground. Once you've done so, we'll continue on by removing all 5 of our 19mm lug nuts and then the wheel. Once you have the wheel off of there, let's start looking at the caliper. You'll find along the back side of it, you will have a bracket that holds your emergency brake cable in place. Right where my index finger is, there's a small U-clip. We'll grab that with some pliers, pull it out of place, make sure it is reusable. There's that clip. We'll set that aside. Now that we have the clip out of there, let's follow that emergency brake cable a little bit further forward. You'll find that you have a 12mm headed bolt holding it in place. Now let's make our way to remove the 2 14mm headed mounting bolts that hold the caliper to the bracket. If you find that the caliper slider spins on you, hold that with some pliers. Start that in a couple threads. Inspect both of those bolts, set them aside. Now we can use a small pry bar and we'll pull this caliper out of place. Once you pull it out of there, it's a good idea to go ahead and remove those brake pads. Give them a close inspection. If they have to be replaced, now's a perfect time to do it. Move along to removing the caliper bracket from the knuckle. You'll find that you have 2 14mm headed bolts. There's that caliper bracket. Let's set this aside. Now with the caliper out of the way, let's go ahead and give the braking surface of the rotor a quick inspection. If yours looks like it's damaged, rusted, or rotted like this one right here, it's a good idea to replace it. I'm going to swap mine out right now. Let's start removing the parking brake cable from the caliper bracket. Now to remove this from this area, you're going to have to use some pliers. We'll grab onto this lever, right where the emergency brake cable connects to the caliper. Give that a little twist clockwise, and then we can pull the cable out of its mounting bracket. There we are. Now that we have that slid through there, let's continue on to removing the cable from the caliper right along this area. It should just swing right out of place. Give that cable a quick inspection. Make sure it's not damaged and it is still reusable. This one looks fine. We'll set it aside. Now we can continue on to removing the brake flex hose from the caliper itself. There will be brake fluid in this area, so make sure you have a collection bucket so you can recycle that fluid properly. To restrict brake flow down to this area, you can use some hose pliers. Be careful not to damage the hose. Just use a little bit of pressure here. 14 millimeter to remove this banjo bolt. Once you have it out of place, make sure that you remove both of the gaskets from that flex hose. Now looking at this banjo bolt right here, I can see I still have one of my gaskets on there. It's important to pay attention to that. Make sure you remove it before you can continue with any installation. Set that aside for now. We'll remove the caliper from that flex hose. Now I can see right on the caliper here, I have my other gasket. Just fell right out of place. We can recycle that. Go ahead and give that hose a quick inspection. You want to look at both sides. Double check to make sure it doesn't have any of the existing original gaskets on either side. Go ahead and clean it down and make sure there's no rust or debris as well. That looks perfect. Let's prepare our brand new caliper for installation. Remove your brand new banjo bolt. That's the area that that flex hose will mount into. You'll find that your caliper came with 2 brand new gaskets. You never want to reuse your old ones. Once you've done so, continue on to removing each of your 2 caliper slider bolts. Use a 12 millimeter on these. Now we can remove the caliper from the bracket. We'll set this aside for now. Let's prepare that caliper bracket for installation. Now for this, what you want to do is take hold of the caliper slider boot. Grab hold of that slider and separate the 2 pieces. Once you have it out of there, it's always a good idea to apply a little bit of extra lubricant on this area. We'll coat the entire shaft and make my way all the way up towards where my fingers are. You can see there's a small groove there. That's where that boot will ride. By having lubricant in this area, it'll help prevent moisture and debris from making its way in. We'll do the same to the other one. You can use a pocket screwdriver for this if you need to. Careful not to damage that boot. Once you've completed lubricating both of those areas, we'll continue on to each side of the caliper where your caliper tins will go. Apply a little bit of high temperature lubricant in these areas. This will help with vibration dampening and noise reduction overall. You'll find with your kit, it came with brand new shims. We'll take this and put it in place and press it in on the center, which will lock it in. If you need to, you could use some pliers. Squeeze that in. It's important to make sure this is completely locked in the proper position so it doesn't move around on you while you're driving down the road. Do the same to the other side. Let's pay attention to the other portion of the caliper. There's a couple areas on this that you want to lubricate as well. We'll lubricate right along this piston area. Once you've lubricated that, lubricate along the back side of each of these 2 ears. Install your anti-rattle clip. Bring this right down in. Slide it in. Okay, let's install that caliper bracket on the vehicle. Slide that right on position. Start in both of your 14mm headed bolts. Snug them up and then torque these to 41 foot-pounds. Now it's time for your brake pads. You'll remember as you had removed them, you should have had a wear indicator, and that would be on the inboard pad. Take those brake pads and slide them into place. Make sure they can move around freely as they should. These feel fine. Now let's take hold of the other aspect of the caliper. We're going to want to situate the parking brake cable. We'll do that by sliding the cable directly onto the lever. Once you've done so, we want to be able to slide the cable directly into this bracket. Just go ahead and give that a little tug without causing any damage. We'll slide it right into place. You may have to twist this a little bit as needed. Slide that right in there. Double check to make sure the base of the cable is aligned with the bracket. Once you've done so, go ahead and put in that locking clip. We'll take that clip and make sure we have the ear facing away from the bracket, so it's a little easier to grab onto in the future if you needed to. We'll tap that into place, making sure that the cable is locked into that bracket properly. Give it a tug and make sure everything's secured. Once you've done so, we can take this and put it right on over those brake pads. Start in each of your 2 caliper slider bolts. Snug them up, and then we'll torque those to 18 foot-pounds. As I had mentioned, if those caliper slider pins try to turn on you while you're tightening or loosening these, go ahead and hold them with pliers. Now it's time for the brake flex hose. When you are attaching this, it's important to have your brand new banjo bolt, and we'll take one of those new gaskets and slide it right on onto that banjo bolt. Take that and slide it right on through the line. We'll put the other gasket on the opposite side of that flex hose. Now we have one on each side. Slide that into position right on the caliper. We'll snug this up, and then you can torque this to 25 foot-pounds. It's extremely important to make sure that you torque this, because if you don't put enough contact on these gaskets, you will have a brake fluid leak in the future. We'll remove our hose pliers from this area. Now let's follow the emergency brake cable back to its mounting point. Get this cable in place. Start it in, snug it up. Confirm it's secured properly. Remove your bleeder screw cover. We'll set that aside. You will be reusing it. At this point, we're going to open up the brake bleeder screw. What you'll find is that no fluid comes out of this at first, because there isn't anything inside the caliper. But eventually, by having this open, gravity will cause the fluid to make its way down through here. So you're going to see a whole bunch of little air bubbles and some fluid. Once you're at that point, go ahead and close that off, and we'll continue on with a manual bleed. We'll use a 10 millimeter. Have your collection bucket under this. Okay, at this point I have a steady trickle of fluid coming out of this. We'll close the bleeder screw. Let's continue on with our manual bleed. Make your way under the hood to the master cylinder, which is located just along the driver's side. We'll open up that cap. Give the seal a quick inspection. We'll set that cap aside. Looking in this area, you want to make sure that you top off the brake fluid with either .3 or .4 brake fluid. Let's close that cap, and then we can do our bleed. Now I'm back at the caliper. To bleed the brakes, it's going to be easiest having two people. One person right out here at this bleeder screw, and the second person will be inside of the vehicle. If you're doing it with a second person, we want to have them go ahead and pump up that brake pedal till it's nice and firm. While it's holding, they're going to let me know, and I'm going to open up this bleeder screw. Typically what we will see is a little bit of air coming out and fluid. After that, I'll close this off. We'll ask them to pump it again. I'm going to open it again. We'll make sure that we only see fluid. If we see any air bubbles, we need to continue this process. Go ahead and pump up that brake pedal. Okay, closed it off again. Go ahead and pump. Oh, I got a good air bubble out of that one. Pump, please. On that last turn, I did not see any air, but let's test it one more time just to confirm. Go ahead and pump. That's no air bubbles twice in a row. At this point, we should be good to go in this area. Go ahead and clean up your mess and reinstall your bleeder screw cover. You can release that brake pedal. Get that bleeder screw cover on there. Now once you have this clean, go ahead and make your way inside that passenger compartment and pump up that brake pedal one more time. We want to confirm there's no brake fluid in this area. Back under the hood, we'll just top off that brake fluid. Once again, we're using either .3 or .4 brake fluid only in this. It's important to make sure that you confirm that your cap is nice and tight so no dirty air or moisture can make its way inside there. Confirm everything's secured properly. Now we'll continue on with reinstalling our wheel. Start on each of your 19mm lug nuts. We'll bottom these out, get the wheel safely back on the ground, and then we can torque each of these to 80 foot-pounds. Now that the wheel's back on the ground, we'll torque these in a crisscross manner. Torqued. Okay friend, we've got our vehicle back together. At this point, you want to hop in the passenger compartment, pump up the brake pedal till it's nice and firm. After that, go ahead and take it for a road test. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.